Tip number 1, try to be at the beginning or at the end. Hollywood blockbuster creators have long been using this trick. The secret is that the human memory is structured in such a way that we most vividly remember what happens at the very beginning and at the end. Imagine this. If a movie starts with a captivating scene and ends with an incredible twist, you will like it, even if there were some boring moments in the middle. This same principle works when communicating with people. Let's say you've been invited for a job interview. Try to be among the first or last candidates. That way, the recruiter will pay more attention to you and remember you better. Tip number 2, mirror your interlocutor like a reflection. Want to make a person well disposed towards you, even if you don't know them well? Copy their manner of communication. During the conversation, try to repeat the gestures of your vis-a-vis, the person you're talking to, their facial expressions, the pace of speech. A large-scale study by New York University on the chameleon effect showed curious results. It turns out that we unconsciously sympathize with people whose behavior resembles our own. We simply like those who are similar to us. Tip number 3, to instantly make a stranger well disposed towards you, use a simple trick. Try to discern the color of their eyes. This is a great method for those who find it difficult to maintain eye contact. You can determine the shade of the iris in just 3 to 5 seconds. This time is quite enough to evoke sympathy. On the other hand, looking into someone's eyes for too long can lead to tension. A person who persistently stares at you is more likely to cause dislike and fear. Tip number 4, fight or flight. Despite thousands of years of evolution, our brain still retains mechanisms inherited from our primitive ancestors. When faced with danger, a person has 2 options for action: to fight or to flee. 1,000 years ago, such a situation arose when encountering a ferocious predator. Today, similar emotions are experienced by a suspect during an interrogation or a teenager who is persistently questioned by parents. In both cases, the heart starts beating faster, and the level of adrenaline in the blood rises sharply. The hands and feet are filled with energy, but it is impossible to flee from an interrogation, so the person unconsciously tries to release this charge. Before lying, they may fidget in their chair, rub their hands, touch their hair, or make unnatural gestures. In addition, in moments when a person is deceiving, their body temperature rises. Therefore, many, especially men, begin to tug at the collar of their shirt or t-shirt to let in air under their clothes and cool down a little. Consider these signs to identify a liar during a conversation. Attention to detail will help you see through a deceiver and gain the upper hand in a conversation. Tip number 5, use the power of silence. When you are in close quarters with someone, silence usually causes intense discomfort. This can be used to your advantage if you need to get the truth from your interlocutor. After asking a question to which you want an honest answer, simply remain silent after the person responds to you. This will create tension if they lied. It will seem to them that you know the truth and are waiting for sincerity. This way, you can make sure that you heard a truthful answer. Additional advice: look not into the eyes, but at the forehead of your interlocutor. At this moment, most people will feel uncomfortable and want to end the conversation as quickly as possible. And for this, they will immediately tell the truth. Tip number 6, compliments. Everyone loves to hear praise about themselves, both women and men. Most Americans start a conversation with a compliment to the interlocutor. They may comment on your shirt, the print on your t-shirt, stylish glasses, or hairstyle, anything. Try starting a conversation with a person you don't know well with a small compliment, paying attention to some detail of their appearance. This approach instantly evokes sympathy from the interlocutor. Of course, you should not expect them to be crazy about you, but their mood will definitely improve. If your goal is precisely to make a person like you, a compliment can also play an important role, but it should be more refined. We are built in such a way that we love to receive rewards. And the best reward for a person is the recognition of their efforts. If you know that the interlocutor has worked hard on something, note this in your compliment. For example, if you know that a woman or man has spent a lot of time and effort to lose weight, be sure to emphasize what great shape they are in. They will almost immediately feel a liking for you. You can also praise the professional achievements or personal merits of the interlocutor. It is always very pleasant to hear such words. A sincere compliment is the key to a person's heart. Remember that praise should be appropriate and tactful. Do not cross boundaries and do not flatter too openly. This can cause the opposite effect. But an apt compliment, spoken from the heart, can melt the ice and endear even the most severe interlocutor to you. Tip number 7. The "could you please advise me" technique. How can you quickly establish contact with a stranger and evoke their sympathy? Let them help you. Most people experience more positive feelings when they have assisted someone than when they have been helped themselves. Imagine that it's your first day at a new job and you want to establish contact with one of your colleagues. Simply ask them for advice on some minor issue. For example, where the nearest cafe is or something like that. It costs the interlocutor nothing, but they will be left with a pleasant feeling that they were helpful. And you will be able to find common ground with them much faster. Tip number 8, the 5-second rule. According to psychologists, when meeting a new person, we need only 5 seconds to understand whether we like them or not. Therefore, if you want to immediately earn the respect and favor of a stranger, it is worth thinking about your image in advance. The two main things that the interlocutor will pay attention to during the first contact with you are your appearance and posture. When speaking of appearance, we primarily mean clothing. The principle of dressing like everyone else is mistaken, because then you cease to stand out against the background of others, which means it will be difficult to arouse interest and sympathy from the first seconds. But this does not mean that the outfit should be very expensive and pretentious. The main thing is that it suits you, and the brand and price tag do not play a decisive role. Posture also says a lot about you. When we slouch, clench up, hide our hands, we subconsciously strive to show as little of our body as possible. For the interlocutor, such a posture means only one thing: they are dealing with a person who is not confident in themselves. It is simply impossible to earn respect in the first moments of a meeting in this way. Therefore, remember your posture, do not hide your hands in your pockets, and do not avert your gaze. Of course, how your conversation goes further and what you will talk about is also important. But the first impression can set the tone for the entire conversation and ultimately lead to success or failure. Tip number 9, the decoy effect. This trick is often used by sellers of various goods, so take note of it in order not to fall for the ploys and not to spend extra money. Let's say you have a product that you want to sell in your store in the maximum quantity. Let it be a camera for $500. To make as many visitors as possible, choose it. Place a $200 camera and a $1,000 camera next to it. The overwhelming majority of buyers will settle on the middle option of the three offered. This is called the compromise effect. We subconsciously strive to cut off the most extreme options and choose something average. This effect is used by a huge number of companies, from coffee sellers to car dealers. Tip number 10. If during a conversation the interlocutor strokes their chin, be sure they are not listening to you. We make a similar gesture when we are deep in thought and do not notice what is happening around us. So if you see a person doing this, stop and don't say anything important. They don't hear you anyway. In a similar way, one can interpret the posture of a person leaning back in a chair. Their body language makes it clear that they are tired and have become bored. In a word, at such moments, it is better to take a break. Tip number 11. If you have problems remembering names, it can cause a lot of inconvenience, especially in the business sphere. People do not like it when you ask again what their name is. But what can you do to better remember names? There is a simple but effective life hack. If a person introduced themselves at the beginning of the conversation, use their name several times during the conversation. Just start a question or sentence with the name of the interlocutor. This way, you are almost guaranteed to remember their name and avoid awkward situations at the next meeting. Tip number 12. Common topics. We tend to feel sympathy for people with whom we have something in common. Therefore, if in the process of conversation you find out that the interlocutor likes the same food as you, prefers similar movies, or engages in the same hobby, be sure to use it. Tell a story from your experience related to this common topic. Ask your interlocutor questions on this topic. By finding common ground, you will become emotionally much closer to each other. Tip number 13. Ask for more. This trick is actively used by salespeople. They give you an inflated price, and at the moment when you are ready to refuse the deal, they lower the cost. In fact, in most cases, this discounted price was their goal all along. They voiced a higher amount only to make it psychologically easier for you to agree to a supposedly more favorable offer. You can effectively apply this same technique in your everyday life. Let's say you want to get aquarium fish, but you know in advance that your parents, husband, or wife will be against this idea. Start by asking to get a cat or dog. When you get a refusal, ask for permission to get fish. In this case, your opponent will most likely agree. Firstly, because fish look harmless compared to a dog. And secondly, the opponent will feel guilty for refusing your first request. Tip number 14. Service in advance. If you want to get a favor from another person, the best way is to make them feel indebted to you. To put it simply, first you voluntarily help the person you need in some matter. Then, when they thank you, never answer, it's nothing or no problem. Instead, say, you're welcome. That's what friends always do for each other. Now, subconsciously, the person will feel obligated to help you when you turn to them. Tip number 15. Watch the color of your clothes. Color is an incredibly powerful tool that subconsciously affects each of us. That is why it is worth carefully monitoring what color of clothing you wear in a given situation. If you want to get a job in a serious company, avoid overly bright colors, such as orange or lime green. This can scare off a potential employer. Also, don't forget about shoes. It is clear that they should be clean and tidy. But in addition, the presence of a heel plays an important role for both men and women. In addition to making you look taller, heels add more authority. People tend to consider those who wear shoes with heels to be more professional and experienced. Tip number 16. Start small. This trick is useful both when interacting with other people and when completing tasks on your own. If you know that you have a big and important task ahead of you, there is a high probability that your brain will resist it with all its might, and you will not be able to get started on the work at all. In such a case, it is helpful to start with something small. For example, promise yourself that you will only work on it for 20 minutes. Most likely, after 20 minutes, having immersed yourself in the process, you will continue working. You can also divide one big task into several small parts and perform them gradually, a little each day. The same technique can be applied to other people. Suppose you are a manager and you have several people under your supervision. You can simply give them instructions to complete a particular task. But there is a high probability that the productivity of employees will be low. It is better to divide one large task into several parts and say to the employees, let's start with this. This way, it will be much easier for employees to get started, and they will cope with the task faster. Tip number 17. To make it personal. This sounds like advice from Captain Obvious, but in fact, many people neglect it. Imagine a situation. You are discussing an idea with a group of friends. It could be a meeting at work or a friendly get-together. At some point, you get into an argument with one of the interlocutors. Arguments run out, and you start making personal attacks. For example, you say that the person has less experience than you, or that they always have bad ideas, or that you know the topic better. At this point, it seems to you that this is a great argument and you have put the interlocutor in their place. But in reality, everyone present begins to perceive you negatively. Your mistake was that you started criticizing the person instead of criticizing their idea. Making things personal always puts the accuser in an unfavorable position. Always criticize the specific suggestion of the interlocutor, and as a next step, offer your own solution. This way, you will look confident and garner the respect of those around you. Tip number 18. Start the conversation with a joke. Humor is a great tool to start a conversation, especially if you know the person very well. Everyone is familiar with that awkward feeling at the beginning of a conversation when you both don't know what to say. A simple joke at this moment will make the interlocutor treat you with more sympathy. It is clear that mastering the art of humor is not so easy. Some people have this skill developed better, others worse. But this does not mean that you need to come up with jokes on your own. Just take them from famous comedians and use them at the beginning of the conversation. Everyone loves people with a sense of humor. That is a fact. However, do not forget to periodically update your arsenal of jokes. Otherwise, you will become that very person who tells the same joke several times. And in that case, you want to gain sympathy, but rather the opposite. Tip number 19. Use food to improve relationships. Since time immemorial, eating has united people. Serious quarrels and showdowns rarely occur during meals. If you know that you have to tell an unpleasant truth to a colleague at work or a close person, do it during a meal. When people eat, they are too busy with this process to fully react to information. Therefore, they will perceive unpleasant news much more calmly than if they were completely focused on the conversation. The choice of place can strengthen this trick. If you eat in a crowded place, the presence of other people will be an additional restraining factor for the outpouring of negative emotions. In addition, We are all prone to nervousness when hungry, so giving the interlocutor something to eat before you tell them unpleasant news is a good idea. This way, their attitude will be calmer. Use food as a tool for building relationships and smoothing out sharp edges in communication. Tip number 20. Confuse to convince. A well-known fact: to convince an opponent, you need to leave them as little opportunity as possible to think over what has been said. Therefore, you can try to speak quickly or confuse the interlocutor. Suppose you need to sell something to a stranger for $50. When you voice the price, say 5,000 cents. At first, the person will be puzzled, trying to convert 5,000 cents to dollars. And thereby they will continue communicating with you. And then the price of $50 against the background of 5,000 will seem quite insignificant to them, and they are more likely to buy your product. Use the effect of contrast and the moment of confusion to tip the scales in your favor. Tip number 21. Want to put your life in order? Start by cleaning your room. It sounds like one of those useless internet quotes. But there is an entire scientific theory behind it that works. There is a phenomenon called the broken windows theory. It appeared back in the 80s in New York. At that time, sociologists noticed that the outbreak of crime in the city was primarily led by minor offenses. The more broken windows, pickpocketing, and other petty hooliganism there are, the more serious crimes appear. When the New York authorities began to fight against minor offenses, the overall criminal situation in the city began to improve. This theory can be applied to personal life as well. If you do not keep order in one area, then soon problems will begin to accumulate in other areas of your life. So if you want to start changing your life tomorrow, just do some cleaning. Put your physical space in order, and this will be the first step towards putting your affairs and thoughts in order. Tip number 22. If you feel nervous and cannot calm down, chew something. This is a simple but effective way to come to your senses. When a person chews, the brain is distracted. That is why you should not try to absorb important information while eating. It is difficult for the brain to do both at the same time. So it is better to relax while eating. Use this simple trick when you need to quickly pull yourself together and relieve stress. Chewing motions will help switch attention and calm nerves. But remember that it is better to choose another time to assimilate important information. Tip number 23. Formulate your request correctly. Suppose you need to ask a friend to help you move. I'm sure most of you would ask like this: could you help me move on Saturday? Such a wording greatly reduces the chances that you will get what you want. By starting the phrase with "could you," you initially formulate not a specific request, but ask an abstract question. Therefore, it is much easier to get a refusal. Instead, ask specifically, "Please help me move on Saturday." This way of asking dramatically increases your chances of getting agreement. But at the very least, the person definitely wants to come up with false excuses and will refuse only if they are really very busy. Formulate your requests clearly and unambiguously to increase the likelihood of a positive response. Avoid vague and non-specific phrases that give the interlocutor the opportunity to evade. Be straightforward and polite, and you will see how the effectiveness of your requests increases. Have you ever noticed someone using these tricks on you? Write in the comments. If you found this video useful, please like it and subscribe to the channel. There are more videos on this channel that will help you become a better version of yourself.